and die, the high life was never foreign to the Egyptian billionaire's son. Fayed was a film producer, his name attached to such movies as Chariots of Fire and The World According to Garp. He was said to have enormous mansions around the world where celebrity guests such as Brooke Shields would come to parties. And he was known to frequently travel on his father's $32 million yacht, aboard which his journeys with the princess were followed by photographers and paparazzi. The London tabloids described him as a handsome playboy with a love of fast cars and beautiful women. He was married once, in 1987, to American socialite Suzanne Gregard, but divorced after 8 months. Still, despite the pomp and splendor of his lavish lifestyle, Fayed's friends said he was a quiet man, even aloof by some standards. A man who, perhaps by his own volition, was virtually unknown until his name, briefly, joined that of British royalty. Dodi Al-Fayed was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident. And of course, reaction to the death of Princess Diana is pouring in from all over the world. Joe Torres is live at the British consulate in the city on the east side with more. Joe?
Hi again, Stacey. This is 3rd Avenue. We're between 51st and 52nd Street. New Yorkers slowly starting to wake up. Remember, this is a Sunday morning. It is also a Sunday morning on a Labor Day weekend. Behind me, the memorial right outside the consulate, and this has been slowly growing and growing as the morning progresses. And as we take you closer to some of the notes that are here, we can show you pretty much what they say. Diana, we will miss you. Rest in peace. Just to the left of that, another note, this one addressed specifically to Prince William, reminding the world that we not only lost a princess, but that 2 boys lost their mother as well. There are roses here, lilies here, large bouquets, and the tears are starting to flow. In fact, here go another dozen roses just arriving now. We talked to one lady. She lives here in New York, but she's from Cambridge, England. She was completely in tears, said she watched the entire news coverage up all night, as did many of the people that we've started to chat with. We went to 2 of the hotels where Princess Diana often stayed when she visited New York. Workers there are devastated as well, and we can expect this memorial to grow as the day progresses. We're live outside the British consulate. I'm Joe Torres, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
I'm sure that's a safe expectation, Joe. Thank you. Time now is about 9:40. We are told that President Clinton is about to give a formal statement just moments from now, and of course we will take you to that statement from Martha's Vineyard when it happens.
Our coverage of the passing of Princess Diana of Wales continues in just a moment. French police are looking into whether the paparazzi may have caused the accident that killed the Princess of Wales and 2 others. The media has been obsessed with the princess for nearly 2 decades. BBC reporter Nick Hyam has more.
From the moment her relationship with the heir to the throne became public, the young Diana Spencer found herself the focus of intense media interest. To begin with, it was her innocence on which the photographers focused. But within weeks of her wedding, the strain of the exposure was beginning to tell. Buckingham Palace was asking editors to treat her gently. But she was too glamorous, her role too close to fairy tale to ignore. When her marriage failed, the media's obsession only intensified. In a speech after her separation, she recalled the impact of it all.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
She became adept at manipulating the media. At the Taj Mahal on a trip to India, she posed alone and soulful as her marriage broke up. She allowed her friends to brief Andrew Morton, author of a revelatory biography, and she gave an interview to the BBC's Panorama without telling her press secretary. In it, she reiterated her complaints against photographers.
I never know where a lens is going to be. A normal day would be followed by 4 cars. A normal day would come back to my car and find 6 freelance photographers jumping around me. Some people would say, well, if you had a policeman, it'd make it easier. It doesn't at all. They've decided that I'm still a project after 15, 16 years that sells well.
The freelance paparazzi she especially detested stalked her every move in search of revealing photographs to sell for tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds around the world. On more than one occasion, she retaliated, this time by snatching the keys of a photographer's motorcycle. These photographs sold for $200,000 in America. The British tabloids, she called them ferocious only last week, bought the pictures as well, even if their staff photographers in recent years stuck mainly to officially sanctioned photo opportunities. Last night, fellow celebrities attacked the paparazzi.
I've actually been in that same tunnel being chased by paparazzis, and they run lights and they chase you and harass you the whole time. It happens all over the world. You don't know what it's like being chased by them. It is harassment under the under the guise of we are the press, we are entitled, and when people are having a private moment, they should be allowed to have a private moment.
The princess's death dominates this morning's newspapers, but Britain's press denies responsibility for the activities of freelancers and says there's no need for tighter controls. Princess Diana had become an icon of beauty, of celebrity, and of glamour, someone the media celebrated. The manner of her death may also make her the media's victim.
That was Nick Hyam reporting from London.
Well, of course, the loss of Princess Diana is something that has gripped the world.
Absolutely, and whether you knew her or not, everyone will feel some loss at the death of such a public figure. Joining us now is Dr. Jean Cirillo. She's a psychologist to talk about coping with the grief. How do people cope with this type of story?
Well, it's difficult because it makes us aware of our own mortality. Nobody is above death. It could happen to anyone at any time, and she was so young, the same age as Marilyn Monroe, 36. That makes it even worse. She's on the same level as John Kennedy or anybody we hold dearest.
And Doctor, I believe with John Kennedy there was some period of flat-out denial. People just didn't want to believe it or accept it.
Exactly. People can't believe that this could happen to somebody like Di because then they have to accept that it could happen to themselves or it could happen to a close family member. And we feel the loss of her just as though she was a family member. We read about her or heard about her every single day.
Of course, what about her children, William and Harry? What is the best way that they will learn to cope with it?
They might become very reclusive, trying to hide from the public eye, and it's already too late. Or they might go on an all-out campaign against the paparazzi.
What should we expect in the upcoming days of the grieving process? I mean,
well,
the shock is still settling in right now.
We should expect that people are going to come out of denial and they're going to turn it around. They're going to turn the denial into anger, and the children are going to pick up on this too, especially in later years when they're alone, when they don't have the world with them anymore.
Parents, watching this with their children, anything that they can say to their children?
Well, they have to explain that death could come at any moment, and all you can do is live a good life, make peace with yourself and everyone around you.
Doctor,
and Diana did that.
Mm-hmm.
Are these some of the risks we take in society? I mean, Diana had appeared on the cover of People magazine more than anyone else. When we put someone on such a pedestal, even a princess, this is kind of where we get into a dangerous zone.
Exactly. You can always fall off, and we tend to think people that are icons are above the laws of society, above the laws of nature. Then when that car crashes and they bleed and they die just like us, we awaken. We see it could happen to anybody at any time.
And of course, Diana's son, William, was already freaked out by the paparazzi, and those were Diana's own words.
Exactly. We saw how vulnerable the whole family was. They were human, even if on some level we elevated them.
Okay, Dr. Cirillo, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cirillo. Just ahead on Eyewitness News, we'll have a special report for you, President Clinton's official reaction to the death of Princess Diana.
Depression has formed. The next storm on the list would be Erica. We had 4 storms in July, nothing in August. Here's the forecast then. For today,
family of Diana, the Princess of Wales, but also to the British public.
I think that that's safe to assume. He's already said in his statement that that the friends and family and the children are remembered in the prayers. I'm sure he'll be making a comment to the British public, who, Kevin, you and I have both worked over there. We both actually covered the wedding all those years ago, and what she brought as a teenager to the British public at that time, when she exploded onto the scene, she just took everyone's breath away. She was a kid, really, who was thrust into she was thrust into a grown-up role, and part of what captivated all of us about her was that she struggled with that role very much like a human being and not just like a royal. And somehow up to the end, she managed to be both royal and a human being at the same time, which is not something that the rest of the royals are always able to pull off in a public way.
Okay, John, thanks. Stand by. As soon as the president comes out, we will go back to you in Martha's Vineyard.
Right now, though, let's check in with Mike Lee, who is in London. Mike?
Good morning. It's been a very emotional day. Thousands bouquets of flowers. We're going to try to show you very quickly as we pan over to the right the number of people that are coming here and standing and parading, just hundreds after hundreds. Some of them just somber, don't seem to know what to say. Others are quite emotional. You can't see it here, but in the middle of this pile is a little teddy bear that a girl brought here a few minutes ago and came and laid it down. And of course, lots of opinions in the crowd today. And as you see, like these photographers around here today, there's seems to be quite a bit of hostility amongst some people toward the media, the British tabloid media. We were talking earlier. What was your opinion about how they tried?
My opinion, I think it was just a setup. We're ready to ready for a setup to put out for this, and it's just a shocking story to everyone in the nation.
And do you feel that
I was a personal friend, so I couldn't say much. So.
You were a personal friend, and do you blame the media in any way for this? How about you? Any reaction from you?
Not really the media, be the paparazzi, really there.
Paparazzi.
I think everyone's got their own opinion, but I think at the end of the day, what they've got to realise is that the boys have lost a good mother. And a devoted mother, just like anybody else, in my circumstances. I'm a mother myself. I have children, are out there, I cannot see. She's now gone, she cannot see them any longer. Mr. Bull's mothers are out there, have children, cannot see them. Or in other countries, and fathers have took them away.
Thank you very much for that. An indication of the depth of emotion here in the crowds. There have been a couple of developments today. We have pictures. Prince Charles has now left Scotland. He's flying over to Paris today. We understand that he'll hold a special service in the hospital in Paris for Diana with a few family and friends, and he'll bring her body back here tonight. The Queen and her husband, Prince Philip, went to church today. We've seen them coming to and fro that church service. That had been a pre-scheduled service. She didn't make any statement to cameras, but did issue a statement earlier today in which she said that she and Prince Charles are deeply shocked and saddened by this terrible accident.
Mike, we're looking at those pictures now at Crathy Church, which is near Balmoral, a convoy of black limousines that were approaching the church.
The cars contain the Queen Mother in the first car, and then Prince Charles, and then, of course, Queen Elizabeth with her husband, the Duke.
Now, apparently also William and Harry, the young princes, were there as well. According to reporters for the American press that were there, they looked shocked and pale, as you might expect, but they were calm, that they went into church, presumably to say prayers and share prayers as well.
The church, of course, is the church that they attend regularly when they are on vacation, as they are right now in Balmoral.
We don't know if the young princes are actually with their father, but we do know that Diana's sisters and immediate family are also with the prince on his way to Paris, and that they expect to be bringing back Diana's body later today, and that she will be back in Britain and to a nation mourning, as we saw Mike Lee report there, sometime after supper time. We're going to just replay and bring you back up to speed on exactly what happened in Paris shortly after midnight Paris time. Diana and her companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, were at the Ritz hotel, which is owned by Mr. Al-Fayed's father, and were almost chased into this tunnel, I guess.
Yeah, now apparently the tunnel, what we're understanding now is the tunnel has a speed limit of about 30 miles per hour, and that car was reportedly traveling at around 60 miles per hour, also apparently being chased by paparazzi on motorcycles.
And that's why you saw some of the reaction that you did from Mike Lee's and from the people around there. There's a lot of anger. You can see that happened at the Pont La Malle, which is about, I think, half a mile from the Eiffel Tower. And as you could see from the wreckage of that Mercedes-Benz, it was a very difficult thing for anybody to survive. Diana did make it to the hospital.
She did. Dodi Fayed and, of course, their driver did not make it. They died on the scene, but Diana was removed from that vehicle, which took apparently an hour and a half.
To remove her.
To remove her from the vehicle, as we see, is absolutely crushed.
Right.
And then once she got to the hospital,
at the hospital there, the cardiac surgeons really tried to resuscitate her. She was bleeding in the pulmonary artery. They managed to repair her pulmonary artery, but then she suffered a cardiac arrest. They could not restart her heart. They actually opened up her chest and tried to massage the heart. For 2 hours, they struggled to save her life. Then finally, at 4 o'clock in Paris, we were told, and the world was told, that Diana, the Princess of Wales, had died. And in fact, that has, as we've said, sent shockwaves around the world. Those are felt no more deeply than in London.
And we do have these words from Prime Minister Tony Blair.
I feel like everyone else in this country today, utterly devastated. Our thoughts and prayers are with Princess Diana's family, in particular her two sons, the two boys. Our hearts go out to them.
Really, everyone's hearts go out to them. The scene in London this morning, the crowds continue to gather outside both Kensington and Buckingham Palace as people lining up to pay their respects, dropping off flowers.
Little notes.
As we've
seen white lilies, of course, roses. One can only imagine young Prince William, who blamed, here's the scene now, we see it, a live picture from outside Kensington Palace. This crowd has grown throughout the morning. And here now we see everybody just laying flowers. There are hundreds and hundreds of bouquets of flowers. She was, as Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, said, the princess of the people. And we are seeing proof of that this morning outside of Kensington Palace. That's where, at this hour, had things not happened what occurred, she would have been reunited with her two sons after spending a vacation with Dodi Al Fayed. She was scheduled to meet Harry and William here at about this hour. And instead we see the laying of flowers and a nation in mourning.
Diana did have this way of touching everyone, touching children, like this young girl, placing flowers.
She was dedicated much of her life to charities, and was, I think we've noted before, made a point whenever she visited AIDS hospices of touching the people who had AIDS at a time when a lot of people were afraid to do that, and she wanted to show that there was nothing to fear, and did that. Here's a little boy. This is a very, very sad moment. We're going to go to a BBC documentary that was aired here on ABC, Turning Point, one of the rare interviews that Diana gave the press, where she talked about what her life has been like under this intense glare of publicity.
An ambassador for this country, I'd like to represent this country abroad. As I have all this media interest, let's not just sit in this country and be battered by it. Let's take them, these people, out and to represent this country and the good qualities of it abroad. When I go abroad, we've got 60 to 90 photographers just from this country coming with me. So let's use it in a productive way to help this country. And when I look at people in public life, I'm not a political animal, but I think the biggest disease this world suffers from in this day and age is the disease of people feeling unloved. And I know that I can give love. I will fight for my children on any level in order for them to be happy and have peace of mind and carry out their duties. But I think what concerns me most of all about how people discuss the monarchy is they become indifferent. And I think that is a problem. And I think that should be sorted out, yes. I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts. But I don't see myself being queen of this country. I think every strong woman in history has had to walk down a similar path. And I think it's the strength that causes the confusion and the fear. Why is she strong? Where does she get it from? Where is she taking it? Where is she going to use it?
And we hope her children are feeling a little bit
of the strength this morning. They certainly need it.
As we watch people gathered outside Kensington Palace this morning pay their respects, we've actually heard from world leaders really from across the globe this morning. New Zealand's Prime Minister said the hearts of his country's people go out to the two young boys Diana left behind.
Australia's Prime Minister called it, quote, a horrible and a tragic accident.
Mother Teresa, who of course met with the princess just 2 months ago in New York, also offered her prayers, and we are waiting for President Clinton's comments from Martha's Vineyard.
As John Donvan reported earlier, the president was made aware of this at a clam bake last night. He is, of course, vacationing in Martha's Vineyard for 3 weeks with Mrs. Clinton. Was made aware of what had happened. You can see just the very heavy hearts and the extreme emotion that the British public are feeling. And I think that's shared just about everyone in the world, that she really was, as she had hoped, we saw on that tape, to be first princess of people's hearts. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that she really did reach out. I had the opportunity at one point just to see her in not only AIDS hospices, but also in cancer wards. And people were kind of suspicious at first, thinking, oh, well, this is all a publicity stunt. But she would sweep into a room and she would lock her eyes on the person who needed to be cheered up the most,
And I suspect it was so disarming because you expect cool, this cool, aloof, regal beauty, and with just a look or a touch, she was able to convey really the depth of her humanity.
She would always touch them, and she would always pull over a chair and just sit beside the bed. You know, these royal tours tend to be choreographed down to the very last thing, and whenever she went into these hospital wards, it was always wide open, and she would essentially walk around, see who she could see. She paid particular attention to women with breast cancer and women going through chemotherapy. And I saw time and time again just what an impact that she would have, because after she would leave the room, and this sounds corny, but it was absolutely the truth, that a lot of people would be saying, you know, she really did make me feel special. And as we all know, anybody who's gone through that knows that that is a very trying time in anybody's life.
And those are just the public visits that we knew about and that we covered. But apparently there were many more private visits of Diana, just wanting to reach out and touch one of those people and give them a glimmer of hope and do it without the glare of the cameras on.
We are, just to remind everybody, awaiting the comments of the President of the United States on the passing of Diana, the Princess of Wales. A number of things have happened this morning. Prince Charles is on his way to Paris with some of Diana's family.
That's, of course, after the family attended a service this morning at the church in Balmoral, where they are on vacation. That was, of course, the Queen Mother and Queen Elizabeth and her husband, along with Prince Charles.
They had expressed obvious shock and distress. I think those were their precise words, actually, at what had transcribed in Paris. It has been an incredible 12 hours. We've talked on Good Morning America Sunday, and we will be talking later on this week with Cokie Roberts and Sam Donaldson about the issue of paparazzi as well. Mm-hmm. And there were apparently 7 people arrested in Paris, members of what are called the paparazzi, which, in case you don't know, are usually freelance photographers. And their job is to try to get that picture of, in this case, Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed, and try to sell it. And there has been a furious bidding war in Britain because of the enormous public interest in this man. She did seem to be the one fellow that we had seen her with who made her genuinely happy.
Mm-hmm. There are those who believe that he really was a source of protection for her, made her feel comforted and protected, and he didn't mind the glare.
He was used to it,
media.
and his family was used to it. You know, we've been talking about Diana, but Mr. Al-Fayed is quite a famous figure in Britain as well. His family owns Harrods Department Store, which is a venerable and expensive store to shop in if you're ever in London. But they have been under the public scrutiny for a good long while. His father wanted to become a British citizen, and there were some objections to Britain of that, of course, because Harrods is such a British store to be owned by Egyptian millionaires has caused some problems. So they, as you say, he was used to the limelight, and in some ways provided protection, and maybe that's why she had such a smile on her face when she seemed to be with him. We are still waiting for the President. We were told that he would be out at approximately 10 minutes to the hour. He has not arrived yet. I suppose
we can go on vacation time, we should point out.
That's right. Nobody's on time on vacation time.
Staff there with him.
Perhaps we can go back and take a look at what's happening outside of Kensington Palace again. It's a scene that is being repeated also at Buckingham Palace, where hundreds of others have gathered to lay flowers.
Kevin, I know you've been watching this scene for hours and hours, and the crowd has just grown and grown and
Absolutely.
grown.
I mean, we have to remember that many Britons went to bed not knowing this had happened, because it occurred at about 1 o'clock.
And like many of us, they woke up to the horrible and tragic news of Diana's death.
And one of the strange things about it is that most of the Sunday newspapers had already gone to press, so they could be coming out on their doorsteps, literally, and looking at the newspaper and not know what had happened. Of course, as word of mouth has swept through the British Isles, and people are now converging, deeply emotional, as you can see here, and paying respects to their fallen princess. We're going to go to a Jim Wooten piece now. Jim is in Paris, where Diana died in a hospital after vain attempts to resuscitate her. Let's go to that piece now.
It happened just past midnight. After dinner at the Ritz, the couple left in a chauffeured Mercedes provided by the hotel and, pursued by photographers on motorcycles, hurtled at high speed into this tunnel beneath the River Seine. It was an horrendous impact. The driver was killed instantly, a bodyguard in the front was badly hurt, and in the rear seat, Princess Diana and Mr. Fayed were fatally injured. He was pronounced dead at the scene. She was rushed to a nearby hospital where she also died. One of several physicians who treated her said she'd suffered massive injuries of her chest, which caused internal bleeding and cardiac arrest. The French Interior Minister, Jean-Pierre Chevènement, announced a criminal inquiry into the cause of the crash. And speaking for the British government, Ambassador Michael Jay.
The death of the Princess of Wales fills us all with deep shock and with deep grief. And our thoughts and our prayers are with her family and her friends.
Meanwhile, as journalists waited and watched, police loaded one of 5 impounded motorcycles belonging to photographers who are now in custody. And as dawn broke over the city, mourners were already bringing bouquets to the scene in memory of the princess. Ironically, she told a Paris newspaper only this past week that were it not for her children, she'd have left Britain a long time ago, permanently, because of all the attention from the press. She and Mr. Fayed returned here yesterday from a Mediterranean vacation, and after an absence of several weeks from her sons, she'd planned a reunion with them in London today. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Paris.
We go from Paris to Mike Lee, who was at Kensington Palace this morning. Mike?
I hear you, yes. It's so sad.
It really is overwhelming. I've been watching the flowers build over the morning.
If you can hear me still, I don't know, but you can have thousands of flowers here, and we'll pan over and show you the crowd once again. I think that tells the story.
I think we're getting a sense from you, Mike, just how deep the emotion is there.
Absolutely. There have been women, children, men, all races and creeds from all parts of the world that come here to Kensington Palace today. A young man, obviously too young to know what it's about, but so many people have said, you know, we remember John Kennedy.
Not much to say, absolutely. There's people there, Mike, that you were talking to a little bit earlier. I mean, the sadness has been tinged, I think, by some anger towards members of the media for the circumstances of the way that Diana, the Princess of Wales, died.
Clearly the people that Mike has been speaking to voiced just absolute outrage.
A number of cars passing by, even just camera crews in London are saying, and we should also say that Diana's brother has said this publicly, that it is the press that has killed Diana. We heard that too from a number of places around the globe. The British Foreign Secretary said at one point that we must remember that this is entirely predictable, given the degree of coverage that the princess has had all her career, all her public life for 15 years since she suddenly emerged, that shy 19-year-old at the side of Prince Charles. It was unbelievable. Mike Lee obviously overtaken it. It is hard to be in the middle of something like that and not feel it. I think all of us feel it in some way as well.
You know, and overwhelmed too as the size of the outpouring of the grief just grows and grows and grows.
She tried, I think, to become a conduit for goodness, and I mean, she wasn't without controversy. We should say that, to be fair. She published that book with Andrew Morton.
But I think it was her very humanness that people so responded to. She was not the perfect princess, did not have the perfect marriage, but really, particularly after they separated, tried to regain a sense of herself and a sense of her identity through the humanitarian causes.
Let's take a look at the life of Diana, the Princess of Wales.
She was born Diana Spencer. There was a privileged upbringing. Her father, Earl Spencer, was well connected to the royals. But her parents divorced when she was a teenager, putting her in the middle of a bitter custody battle. Diana might never have been a household name had it not been for her youth and innocence at a time when the British royal family was looking for a suitable and uncontroversial bride for Prince Charles. This girl had no history, no ex-lovers to haunt the royal image makers. From the moment the engagement was announced, the world was captivated by the fairy tale. Diana was only 19. Charles was 13 years older and more worldly, but the public wanted to believe it would work. It was the wedding. At At that moment, we did not know that Diana, the storybook bride, was already feeling neglected by Charles. Gradually, cracks in the marriage became obvious. Diana, emotionally distressed, became bulimic, pale and thin. Years later, after recovering her health, she spoke about that emotional trauma.
Feelings of guilt, of self-revulsion, and low personal esteem.
At times during their turbulent marriage, she made a point of appearing to be unhappy. Early signs that she also knew how to use the very media that would eventually hound her. She was the most photographed woman in the world, the charisma to draw attention to herself and away from other royals. Diana was a superstar, but increasingly she was a lonely figure. Throughout all of this, there were some happy images. She had 2 sons, William, heir to the throne after Charles, and Harry, symbols of happiness, yet no solution for the growing vacuum between herself and her husband. In 1992, open warfare erupted in books. Diana accused Charles of an affair. Charles told his own story of the long-suffering husband, but admitted to adultery with Camilla Parker Bowles. The battle escalated in TV interviews.
She has been a friend for a very long time, and along with a lot of other friends, and will continue to be a friend for a very long time.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
In the British press, lurid, often tasteless stories about her private life. The divorce was final almost 1 year ago today. Recently, she had appeared to put the worst behind her, working for charities, traveling to Africa and to Bosnia to campaign for the victims of landmines. And this summer, Diana seemed to have found a new love in Dodi Fayed. There had been much speculation they would marry. Now, this nation mourns her. She leaves to the world a bashful future king, 15-year-old William, and his 12-year-old brother Harry, both seen here recently on holiday in Scotland. Today, millions of hearts will be feeling their pain.
That was Mike Lee reporting, of course. Let's go now to John Donvan, who is at Martha's Vineyard, where the president is, of course, on vacation. John, do we know when the president is expected to give his comments?
He was expected 15 minutes ago to give his comments, so he's obviously running late, which is not unusual for him. There may be complications we don't understand. He will not be appearing here. I'm at a location in the center of Edgartown. He is at a separate compound closer to the water, and we have a separate camera down there. So when he's ready, we'll be told with about 2 minutes notice, and that's a promise they do tend to keep. They do stick to that 2-minute notice, and then he will appear before that camera. We're expecting that he'll make a statement. He's probably got something written. I would not be surprised if the First Lady were with him, and there will be a few reporters at that camera who will be able to ask some questions if they want to answer. One of the questions, I'm sure, will be, now, Mr. President, what do you do if there's a funeral and a public funeral? Are you going to cut short your vacation, if that's what it takes, and go over to London? We've been talking among ourselves here. We have no information on that, although I would say fairly informed speculation is that we wouldn't be surprised if the First Lady were to go. It is not an official, will not be an official funeral because she's no longer has that official capacity in the royal family, though she is a princess. At the same time, it's a funeral that one way or another the entire world will want to see, which ironically, once again, the final chapter in her life will be experienced or not experienced with intense publicity. All of us will be watching.
That's a really fascinating point you make. I mean, this really has come full circle. We were introduced to Diana in her wedding in 1981. I remember, John, you were covering it. I covered it from a different place. But it was the stuff of fairy tales at the time. She looked magnificent, and the prince looked charming, and we all thought it would last forever. It did not, of course. I'm given to understand that the president will be coming out in approximately 1 minute 45 seconds, so we are standing by for that. It has been a troubling and a very tragic 12 hours for Diana's family, of course, her 2 young sons, for the people of Britain, and for people all around the world who had watched as this young princess blossomed into a potential queen, and then at the loss of that marriage, became an ambassador for good works.
And then really, as we all have watched these 12 hours unfold, first, of course, with the news of the tragic accident and all the coverage from that scene, then later, of course, with the announcement that the princess had died. We continue to watch the royal family this morning.
Who attended church, Charles and the 2 sons. attended church in Balmoral, Scotland, before Charles and Diana's immediate family flew to Paris to claim the body and bring it back to Britain and a nation that is mourning her this morning very deeply. There has been waves of grief as word spread around the British Isles that this had happened. Almost grief and disbelief, I suppose, is the only way to describe it.
And a fair amount of anger.
Yes, a fair bit of anger aimed at the press in general, because of the way that the paparazzi in France seem to have played a role in the car speeding away to try to escape from them and going twice the speed that it should have apparently, and then smashing so horribly into a tunnel under the Seine River not too far from the Eiffel Tower. Let's go to Martha's Vineyard, to the picture that we are awaiting. The president, of course, on vacation there. We are awaiting him to step in front of a microphone in Martha's Vineyard to provide the first comments that he has made. There was a statement released from the White House not shortly after first word that she had been injured, and another statement shortly thereafter that she had died, where the first couple expressed sincere sadness and regret at what had happened. We will, as John Donvan reported, expect to hear a little bit more of the president's thinking and indeed who will be attending the funeral.
And perhaps see him joined by the First Lady.
Mrs. Clinton, yeah. We don't know much about the funeral. John mentioned that because this will not be a state affair, because she was not a member of the royal family, these things become moments of diplomacy, and there are levels of diplomacy in everything, and that is also the case, of course, in state funerals. So it's not clear just who will be attending the funeral, but from what we've seen in London, there will be a massive outpouring of the common people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we are getting word that the president is close to the podium. He will make his comments. There it is, his car. President, of course.
Alone. It does not look like Mrs. Clinton is there.
The third week of a 3-week vacation on Martha's Vineyard.
Let's listen to the President of the United States.
Good morning. Let me say again how very sad Hillary and I are about the terrible accident that has taken the life of Princess Diana and the others who were with her. We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry. And I know that this is a very difficult time for millions of people in the United Kingdom who are deeply shocked and grieving. And the American people send their condolences to all of them, and we value their friendship, and we understand this great and painful experience. For myself, I will always be glad that I knew the princess, and always think of her in very strong and positive terms, as will Hillary. And we can only hope that her work will go forward, and that everyone who can will support her two fine sons and help them to have the life and the future that she would want. Thank you.
You yourself on this vacation have been subject to intrusive photographers. Is there a lesson in this tragedy for the press? Should we back off?
I think it is better right now if we let a little time pass and let this event and the people involved be honored and grieved, and then we'll have time to think about that and maybe make a better judgment. I think it's better for me not to say anything until this moment has received its due respect. Thank you.
And obviously emotional, President Clinton.
Ending his remarks rather quickly. John Donvan is in Martha's Vineyard standing by. John? John, can you hear us? No, we don't have time.
We have heard this, actually, what the President said there about this is a moment to mark the loss of Diana, the Princess of Wales, not a moment for politics. We have heard that throughout the morning from leaders everywhere. We've heard that from Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, from the opposition leader, the Conservative opposition leader in Britain as well, that the politicians don't generally want to get into this discussion of whether or not the press went too far with Diana, contributed to her death. They are, of course, marking the passage on this day.
And clearly the President choosing his words very carefully and choosing to offer his condolences, of course, to the royal family and to the people of England, and express his hope that her legacy, that Princess Diana's legacy, does live on through her good works.
She has said that she wanted to be remembered in the hearts of the British people, and that is certainly happening this morning. Let's take a look outside of Kensington Palace, if we can. That is the palace where Diana lives and lived, occasionally with her two sons. ABC's Mike Lee, we are having obviously some technical problems with reaching him, but I think he can hear us. Mike, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the anger that the crowd feels. Are you feeling much of that towards the press?
There have been a couple of dozen people who have come by today and made various comments, mainly directed at still photographers, and irrespective of whether they may have been paparazzi, and most of the ones with me here today were not, have received a lot of hostility. A good friend of mine, who is a still photographer for an American magazine, said, "Look, I've never ever done a story on Di, and I've never seen so much hostility. That people were being called scumbags and all sorts of things." But I think also people are beginning to reflect upon whether there's a collective responsibility for all of this. After all, people do have to buy newspapers in order for the money to be made to pay these freelance photographers.
But you know, forgive me, but we have heard this before. We have not suffered the loss like this before, but the British press has been engaged in a fierce debate about just how far to go on this stuff. What's your sense? Is this the moment, do you think, that the tabloid press finally takes the message or is this the moment when the British government begins to clamp down and actually tries to regulate some of the coverage of the royal family?
Well, you'd like to think that something's going to happen voluntarily, and the way the law stands now, it is a voluntary code of behavior, which is routinely disobeyed and flaunted, and is very ineffective. Some British officials already today are starting to talk about whether there should be a review, whether there should be more government regulation. This is more or less in the heat of the moment. It's a country that does not like to pass laws that prohibit free speech, so it's going to be a wide open debate. There's no question that this has had a profound effect on the public, and I don't think that the tabloid papers in particular are going to get away without a lot of public criticism. But at the end of the day, if people are going to buy these papers and read them and provide the money and buy these photographs from outside, it's very difficult to enforce, and to enforce it out of existence unless you pass very stringent laws. And frankly, I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. Now, Mike, the very same public interest that fuels the sales of all those magazines and newspapers is in fact causing that crowd behind you to grow. Who has gathered there? Is it mostly people from London? Is it people from all over the world?
Let's find out. Let's share some of the feelings. Madam, where are you from, and how have you reacted to this?
I'm from Hertfordshire, but I think the news is so stunning. We've had to come down and check it out.
And what was your, when you heard?
I was just shocked.
And what about you, madam?
I was just so shocked. I said, no, it's not true. I just could not believe.
Do you blame the media for this in any way?
Yes, I do. I do. Because they harassed her. They chased. She couldn't even have one night with the man that she loved. Just unhappiness. Her life ended as her happiness began. And she was chased, and they wouldn't let up on her, and look what's happened.
But do you think that we in the public share responsibility if we buy the newspapers? What do you think about that?
Well, they buy...
I don't buy newspapers because
obviously a lot of people do.
But it must actually make sense for the media to actually buy these pictures. And I believe people are making millions.
Yeah, but you see, then it's, you know, there's bits that's going to come in that they're still going to exaggerate things. They're still going to say something. They're not going to let it lie. So it's sad. She never ever did anything right in their eyes, but in the people's eyes, yes.
This is a beautiful woman.
Yes. Let me just move down to you, madam. What is your reaction to what we've been saying?
I think there's something in it. She was hounded to her death. Even the fact that she died at the hands of the photographers. It was simply that in her life.
We don't know for sure that that was the case.
It sounds very much as if they had a lot to do with it. But I think it was so sad the way she was hounded during her life, not just the fact that she was chased chased on the streets. But the fact that she was so misrepresented, she seemed to me to be a woman who tried her best in very bad circumstances.
We've been talking amongst us here whether there might or should be new laws that prohibit this sort of things. What do you think of that?
Possibly, but I think we have to be careful not to rush into new laws right now. We don't want to react to this situation immediately with a new law. I think what you were saying about the fact that we don't like to pass laws in this country that prohibit activities. I think maybe after a few months when we have time to maybe we'll come up with something workable. But it is difficult to control everybody because these are paparazzi. We can't control that in this country.
But they're published here. They're bought and published here.
Yeah, and we bear some responsibility perhaps for buying these newspapers. I don't myself, but a lot of us do.
You'll never get anyone like Diana?
Never get anyone like Diana. Madam, come in and tell me what you feel.
Oh, well, I'm lost for words because I love Diana dearly. I don't know her in person, but I always feel she's always near me like a family. I love it very much. I had to come out here today. I don't think I'll ever feel good if I didn't come down today.
What do you think it's done to the country? I mean, the most
terrible. They'll never find no one like that. And I didn't want to say it, but I really, really dislike Prince Charles, what he done to her. And I've lost a dear friend.
Let me ask you, Sarah, do you think that the press is to blame for this, or in some way, or do you think that everybody shares it?
Well, I think everybody shares some responsibility too, but I think the press is to blame a little bit. I'm from the States, and we have the same problem in Hollywood too, with the stalkerazzi, chasing celebrities and things like that.
Okay, thanks very much, Mike. Mike Lee, thank you for yeoman's service this morning. A very emotional scene outside Kensington Palace.
Clearly, people expressing their love and great sorrow.
Okay, we have a lot more this week with Sam Donaldson. Cokie Roberts is coming up immediately on the full ABC network. As well, we'll have full coverage, of course, on ABC's World News tonight.
The Weather Channel. No. Action News, Delaware Valley's leading news program with Phil Andrews and Rob Jennings.
A coffin draped in the special colors of Britain's royal family brings the body of Princess Diana home to a nation stunned and saddened by the end of a tragic fairy tale. Sunday night, the big story on Action News is the death of a princess. Britain's Princess Diana was killed late last night in that grinding car crash in Paris. Also killed her boyfriend, Dodi Al-Fayed, and their chauffeur. Let's go to ABC's Monica Schumann live in London with the very latest now.
You can feel it, you can see it. Clearly, London is in a state of shock tonight, as is much of the rest of the world, saddened by a loss of a woman that many only knew through television, magazine, and newspapers. Yet still, the Princess of Wales is intensely missed tonight.
It's still difficult for most people to absorb that Princess Diana is dead, but seeing a casket bearing her body makes her death all very real. Prince Charles and Diana's two sisters flew to Paris today to accompany the body back to Britain. Their arrival outside of London was a somber scene as a Royal Air Force honor guard carried the flag-draped casket and placed it into a hearse.
I think it's a great shame.
And I'm just beyond all grief, and my heart is broken.
Mourners from all over the world have been flocking to Princess Diana's home, Kensington Palace, as well as Buckingham Palace, to share their sadness, a sadness that is felt worldwide. From his vacation in Martha's Vineyard, President Clinton expressed his sorrow at the news of Princess Diana's death.
We liked her very much. We admired her work for children, for people with AIDS, for the cause of ending the scourge of landmines in the world, and for her love for her children, William and Harry.
Just after midnight, Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed left the Ritz Hotel in Paris, trailed by photographers on motorcycles. The high-speed chase ended with their Mercedes crashing into a wall in a highway tunnel near the Seine River. The car was smashed nearly beyond recognition. Fayed and the chauffeur died at the scene. Princess Diana and her bodyguard were taken to a Paris hospital. Doctors worked for hours trying to revive her, but she finally died of a lung hemorrhage and cardiac arrest.
This is not a time for recriminations, but for sadness. However, I would say that I always believed the press would kill her in the end.
Just within the last week, the princess publicly complained about being harassed by the press, calling them ferocious. Paris police have now stepped up their investigation. At least 4 photographers have been detained, their motorcycles confiscated, and tonight, police are scanning 20 rolls of film, hoping to find clues to the cause of this devastating crash.
The lone survivor of that accident was the bodyguard for Dodi Fayed. Trevor Rees-Jones is reportedly in intensive care with non-life-threatening injuries. Paris police say if he survives, they hope he can provide some key information concerning what happened. Also, Buckingham Palace says it hopes that by tomorrow morning it will begin releasing details concerning the funeral arrangements for Princess Diana, the women many say will be remembered as always the Queen of Hearts. Reporting live in London, Monica Schumann for ABC News.
Thank you, Monica. The fatal crash that took the princess's life is still sending shockwaves throughout the world. Somebody has placed flowers in her memory at the base of the Union Jack here on the Ben Franklin Parkway. Mourners, some in tears, have dropped off flowers at Buckingham Palace. Still others have gone down into that tunnel to the crash scene with their offerings. It was around 6, just about this time last night, that the big Mercedes slammed into the center divider and bounced off the tunnel wall. It all happened at a high rate of speed with those motorcycle photographers reportedly on their tails. Reporters say the princess and Dodi Al-Fayed were not wearing seat belts. He was killed instantly. Doctors worked for 4 hours to try to save Princess Diana, but she never regained consciousness. She ultimately died from a heart attack brought on by massive chest and lung injuries. It was back in 1981 that Lady Diana Spencer went from being a quiet nursery school teacher to one of the most famous women in the world. Her engagement to Prince Charles became official that year. Lady Spencer was considered just royal enough and innocent enough to become the wife of the future King of England. Their wedding in 1981, as you can imagine and probably remember, was a worldwide television event. More than 750 million people tuned in to see this fairy tale, and in less than a year, Prince William was born. In 1984, Prince Harry. But by 1986, rumors of arguments and infidelity dogged the prince and princess. They separated in 1992. And 2 years ago, when the princess admitted she had had an affair and suspected her husband had done the same, the Queen ordered a divorce. That was final in August of last year. Since then, the princess continued her campaigns on behalf of children, AIDS patients, and against landmines. She was only a peripheral royal, but she remained at the center of attention. Royal watchers also thought Diana might have found happiness with her new companion, Dodi Al-Fayed. Tabloid photographers snapped photos of the couple on several different vacations and quoted friends as saying the pair might even marry. Al-Fayed was 42 years old, a sometime movie maker, the son of the flamboyant owner of London's Harrods department store. Stories floated around that Dodi had money problems, owed back rent and lots to American Express. An ex-girlfriend said he broke their engagement and bounced a big check to her. But in the photos, he and Diana looked very happy. Last night, they had dined at the Ritz, owned by the Fayed family, and they were on their way to his villa in Paris. And that night on the town apparently captured the interest of the paparazzi, those photographers who work for tabloid newspapers. And the Princess Di story has always been the sort of thing that sells those papers. Kristen Z is now live at a newsstand in Center City with more on that angle. Kristen?
Rob, for many people, reading the tabloids is a guilty pleasure. But some say today there's no pleasure in it, only guilt. Tabloids have become a permanent fixture at supermarket checkout stands. This week's covers feature captions like, "Psychic warns Di, dump Dodi," and "Di in new sex scandal." Sensational? Sure, but readers admit they're drawn to these stories, especially when Princess Di is the subject.
I guess curious, more or less.
But now the same public says this time the paparazzi has gone too far.
I think there is a responsibility that people should not be hassled by people hounding stories and selling their lives.
You know, you live in a glass bowl when you're a queen or a princess, but they certainly have their rights too, as anyone else does.
Carmen Zimbalardi of Roslyn is a retired paparazzi who was once punched out by Frank Sinatra. He denounces his cohorts who harass celebrities to no end, but he firmly believes that having your pictures taken comes with the territory of being famous.
Sometimes famous people, if they don't punch you out, they elude you and evade you, and that makes a photographer more persistent next time to get the picture. And that's always been my motto, get the picture at all cost.
But today, the editor of the National Enquirer is quick to say that he won't buy the accident scene pictures at any cost. The asking price on the world market is $1 million.
They've refused to buy them, and we're asking that the rest of the world press join us in shunning these photos.
One man we talked with made this point. If nobody was willing to pay for these pictures, then the tabloids would stop publishing them and the photographers would stop going after them. So perhaps right now, both the paparazzi and the public need to do some introspection. Reporting live in the Action Cam, I'm Kristen Z in Center City.
Thank you, Kristen. The royal tragedy had people scrambling for anything having to do with the princess at this Barnes & Noble bookstore in Jenkintown. Books and magazines about the life of Princess Diana were gone from all the shelves by noon today.
It's a tragedy and people are shocked, and they want to remember her because she was a very kind and beautiful woman.
And Diana's death is having a huge impact on another woman who married into the royal family, Sarah Ferguson. Fergie and Diana were very close, and they often shared tales of royal family woes. A spokesperson says the Duchess has lost a sister and a best friend, and that there are, quote, no words strong enough to describe the pain in her heart. That pain of losing Princess Diana is also being felt by her transplanted countrymen. Matt O'Donnell is live in Society Hill with that part of the story. Matt?
Rob, here at Dickens Inn in Society Hill, you see the Union Jack flying at half-staff like just about any other Union Jack all across the world. And here in the window of the restaurant, you see some flowers that they've left for people to see. One of the emotions that people are feeling, so the people that we talk to at least, is utter disbelief. On Sundays, the Dickens Inn does not look like this. It's usually filled with soccer fans. The bar has soccer games on satellite. Today's matchup would have been Liverpool versus Newcastle, two big rivals.
She certainly was the one that everybody admired most, without any doubt. Young and old.
All sporting events have been canceled in Great Britain to mourn. British and Irish natives, hoping to see a good game with good company, instead watched news reports and reflected on a woman they had deeply admired.
She was right up there, you know, alongside the likes of Mother Teresa. She touched people's lives, the less fortunate than her. She just seemed to bring a smile to everybody's face who didn't have a smile.
Very compassionate, very caring. I don't think any other royal has ever made that impression before on the general public.
With reflection also came anger.
It's the press have literally hounded her to death. I think there's blood on the hands of the tabloid press in the UK, and I think it's shocking.
At Melrose Diner in South Philadelphia, it was impossible to find defense for the paparazzi.
If people wouldn't buy the tabloid magazines, there wouldn't be paparazzis around. And they wouldn't make any money. There's nothing to sell.
Yeah, there's a way to stop it. Give them a nice hefty fine, the same kind of money they make by selling it to the tabloids and to the magazines. Fine them that much.
But on top of that anger, once again, just about everyone, whether they met her or not, feels touched by a woman who became one day to be the most celebrated royalty in Great Britain's history. I'm Matt O'Donnell, live in the Action Cam in Society Hill.
Indeed she was. Thank you, Matt. And that is the latest on the death of Princess Diana. Funeral plans will be announced tomorrow. The body of the princess was returned to an airbase outside of London this afternoon in a coffin draped with the flag of the royal family. Princess Diana, her companion Dodi Al-Fayed, and a chauffeur were killed late last night when their car crashed into this Paris tunnel as they tried to outrun a pursuing gang of paparazzi. 7 of those photographers are still in police custody. And right now, Monica Malpass and an Action News crew are on their way to London as Britain mourns for Princess Diana. Monica will be reporting live beginning tomorrow on the funeral plans and the princess's ties to the Delaware Valley. And stay tuned to Channel 6 ABC tonight as ABC News presents a 2-hour special report, Diana, Princess of Wales, the Royal Tragedy. It'll be hosted by Peter Jennings, Barbara Walters, and Diane Sawyer. 7 tonight here on 6 ABC. So at the age of 36, the life of the princess whose fairy tale marriage turned into a nightmare on a worldwide stage